It's one of the things that Kirby Smart's talked about recently that he's not comfortable with. I'm going to read you what he had to say. And it was, I'm not comfortable with depth at any position. He was asked about receiver. He said, you can never say you're comfortable with depth at any position. I'm not comfortable with depth at tight end, which is, interesting. We've had two or three tight ends that got every rep in the fall because in the spring because of Darnell being out, Brock was out, other guys had to get all the reps. I'm still not comfortable with it. He's talking about soft tissue injuries. That's really a concern, I think, for his program, generally speaking. He said, I feel good. I feel good that we have some good young receivers, but they're not experienced. Um, I'm not sure about that part necessarily, but whatever. We've got to get them some good, we got to get them enough experience, valuable experience in the early part of camp so those guys are productive at the end of the year. Last year, A.D. Mitchell was not a guy anybody talked about, but he got a great chance in the spring because of guys like George Pickens and Jermaine Burton being hurt. That's because of injuries to George Pickens and Jermaine Burton. He said that helped AD make the plays he made at the end of the year, which were critical. Yeah, we have to have more guys like that that played in the spring or in fall camp. They're being ready to go by week 7, 8, or 9 because it's not realistic to think the guy that just got here can be ready to go by game one. They're not. I mean, I don't know if they're gonna be ready to go in game one. They're not gonna play in game one. I mean, you still have Kyrus Jackson, Blaylock, who was running with the twos. It was. I'm just going off memory here. It was A.D. Mitchell. I wrote about this over on Dog Post. Now make sure you're going to go to that you're going to the site because we've got so much more over there, and there's only so much that we can talk to y'all about. But during one thing that I wrote about during the rotation part of the time that we saw, it was Brock Bowers who was flexed out on one side, and then you had Lab McConkey, A.D. Mitchell, and Kyrus Jackson. They were kind of bunched up together. Now those guys have plenty of experience. I mean, A.D. Mitchell made a game-changing game, whatever you want to call it, catch against Alabama in the national championship game. That Kirby Smart reacted in the locker room after the game saying, "AD on top, that won the game." He told the locker room. There it is. Another plug for DAWGSTRUCTION. Make sure you're picking it up today. If you pick it up today, you get our 2022 preview included for free. We are running out of the previews. Get them now. The best way to get them is by getting DAWGSTRUCTION. This value will not be there in a few weeks because I won't have the magazines. But get DAWGSTRUCTION today. And when you start talking about the guys that they've got, once you get further past this group, yeah, they are not as experienced. The next wave of guys was Eric Gilbert flexed out to the side with Blaylock, Jackson Meeks, and Marcus Rosenberry Saint all bunched up together. So you also had in the next run was Darnell Washington, Mikai Muse, I could be pronouncing that wrong, Arian Smith, and then Dylan Bell. So the younger guy, so Bell obviously is a new player. Arian Smith is not. He's just not been healthy. I mean, Arian Smith was a top 100 prospect consensus. So was Marcus Rosenberry Saint and Don Blaylock. Those guys have all been sidelined because of injuries. But they're gonna have to get where they need to go in terms of building depth in this team. So it is not an ideal situation in terms of depth. He said this is again what he said. He said um, last year going into 2001, A.D. Mitchell was not a guy a lot of people talked about, but he got a great chance in the spring because of injuries to George Pickens and Jermaine Burton. That helped A.D. Mitchell make plays that he made at the end of the year, which were really which were critical. We have to have more guys like that that play in the spring or in fall camp and they're ready to go by week 7, 8, or 9 because it's not realistic to think a guy like that is going to be ready to go. That just got here can be ready to go by game one. We saw AJ Green wasn't ready to go game one. I remember that Georgia Southern game, but people after the performance from AD in G Day, people were talking about him. In fact, there was plenty of buzz about AD coming into it. I think we've not seen. I think we've sort of only seen the surface of what AD will be able to do for this Georgia Bulldog team. Um, but I do, I do like these receivers. Now, they're um, I don't know if they're all the same. That's probably the wrong way to put it. But they they have they I think they do have more depth perhaps than they've had in the last 10 years, generally speaking. Now, there are times when Georgia was deeper. 2012, they were definitely, I would say, deeper. Perhaps in 14. Remember, in 13, everybody got hurt. In 15 on is when it got kind of thin. But then in 18, I feel like 17 and 18, they were in pretty good shape. But, like in 20, when everything just went sideways. You just you had injuries that felt like all over the place. Um, Last season with Jermaine, I think Jermaine was banged up in the spring, and George was gone the whole season until the SEC until the Tech game, but essentially the SEC championship game. So. Um, they had to play younger guys, and I guess he's probably worried, Kirby, what happens if guys get hurt. Well, you can only have so much depth at any position as it relates to your scholarship numbers. I mean, you've got 85 scholarships, that's it. There's only so many Dan Jacksons and Stetson Bennett's running around that are guys who were former walk-ons that became starters. That just it's just not going to be a common thing at Georgia. So, the younger guys, Smith, Morissette, Bell, Spear, yeah, I mean, I think if you had one of those guys kind of get going, that would be just another opportunity to make plays for the dogs. I mean, I get the feeling watching practice that they think they can really throw it and that they think they can get it out quick, get on the edge, get their 5 yards or 4 yards or whatever like that, these sort of safe edge passes. And when you're out there defending that, then they're going to hit you with a run. It's much more the way that I thought Clemson would play in 2021 with DJ Ugalele. He just wasn't good. So I think that this side to side thing can be really problematic when you have a really good running back. And think back to the reason why I thought Clemson would do that is because they had that for such a long time where they had, Wayne Gallman was developed. He was not a great prospect coming out of Grayson. But he did a great job for what they wanted to do when he was with Deshaun. And of course, Deshaun could take off running too. But with Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne, you had a quarterback who could get the ball out quick, obviously was very gifted. But the problem you had was you had Travis Etienne. So who is the Travis Etienne for this team, right? Who is the James Cook? Who can just blister it and run up the middle? Because you have to be able to do both. We can talk about all the tight ends all we want to. You have to be able to hit forehands and backhands in this game. You can't just rely on thinking you're just going to hit forehands all day long. In this modern world of the college football, teams can score too quick. If they want to stop you from running, a lot of times they can. So really, it's about having these receivers so that you can also hit people with the run and vice versa. I mean, you got to be able to do it all. You can't say, "Oh, we've got a great quarterback and we're going to kill you with the quarterback." No, not if they don't have a running back with them. I mean, that's going to be one thing that with Gibbs going over to Alabama that will really help them, is give them a more legitimate threat at running back. Um, Now he had a hard time against Georgia, but when he was playing at Georgia Tech, but he didn't have a quarterback. So it is about balance and taking advantage of the opportunity that you've got. And if Kirby's concerned about depth at receiver, I see what he's saying to some degree. I also think this is a good group. The top six, not including tight ends, McConkey, Mitchell, Jackson, Blaylock, Meeks, and Rosemary Jack Saint. That's a pretty good top six, if you want to call it that. You also have Arian Smith, who is a burner. So your top seven guys at receiver are positioned to be pretty good. They are not overwhelmingly experienced. That is true. But they have, I mean, Ladd McConkey's made big plays for Georgia, A.D. Mitchell, Kyrus Jackson, and Dominique Blaylock. They just have not all done it in the same season. So that is certainly something to watch from Kirby Smart.